Hey everyone! So, you've just started playing Crystal of Atlan and now you're staring at that class selection screen like, wait, what do I pick? Don't worry, you're not alone. Right now, the game has 5 base classes and 11 specializations that unlock once you hit level 15. And trust me, each one plays totally differently. Some are all about supporting your team, others shine with crazy crowd control and AoE damage, and then there are those absolute beasts that melt down single targets in no time. In this video, we're breaking down all those subclasses to help you pick the perfect fit, whether you're here for PvP or PvE action. I'll tell you which ones are crowd favorites, which can wreck bosses, and which just bring the fun and strategy. So stick around and let's get you out of that indecision and into some serious Crystal of Atlan gameplay. I'm quickly moving on to the video and I'm ranking PvP and PvE classes in Crystal of Atlan. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. First, let's talk about the best classes for PvE.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The classes for PvE in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Starbreaker and Berserker. Alright, let's talk about some of those classes that really make you go, maybe not my first pick, when you're diving into the depths of Crystal of Atlan's player versus environment content. I mean, everyone loves a good underdog story, but some classes are just a little too underwhelming to carry you through the grind without pulling your hair out. First up, Starbreaker. Now, don't get me wrong, she's a fantastic tank with some serious burst damage potential in PvE. If you want to soak up hits like a pro and then drop a bomb on the enemy, she's got your back. Plus, she's pretty easy to get the hang of, which is great if you're not looking to spend 100 hours mastering combos. But here's the kicker, her skill cooldowns are so long, you'll find yourself standing around twiddling your thumbs more often than not. And when it comes to sustained damage, especially in group play, Starbreaker's like that friend who's amazing for a party trick but then disappears when the real work starts. So yeah, if you're looking to shine in party-based player versus environment modes or the Crystal of Atlan raid, Starbreaker might leave you hanging. Now, onto Berserker. The wild frontliner who thrives on chaos. His area of effect damage is solid, and if you're in a party pushing through PvE content, he's definitely one of the best at holding the line. The catch? To really dish out the pain, he needs to be low on health, like dangerously low, which means you're constantly flirting with death just to squeeze out maximum damage. Thrilling, yes, but also kind of stressful. Oh, and while his invincibility skill sounds awesome, it's really only practical in player versus player battles where dodging hits is a must. When you're facing monsters in Crystal of Atlan, it doesn't quite translate to the same survival edge. So, even though Berserker can bring the heat, in pure player versus environment terms, he's still one of the weaker options. At the end of the day, both Starbreaker and Berserker have their moments to shine. But if you're aiming to crush player versus environment challenges in Crystal of Atlan efficiently and without unnecessary frustration, you might want to keep them on the bench or just use them for fun when you're feeling experimental, because honestly sometimes the most fun is just knowing you could play them, but probably shouldn't if you want to win. The classes for PvE in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Blade Maiden and Magician. Alright, let's dive into some real talk about these C-tier warriors in Crystal of Atlan's player versus environment battles. First up, the Blade Maiden. She's like that friend who shows up with fireworks and a jetpack. Her burst damage per second is absolutely insane, and she's great at kiting enemies around like a pro. You know, making the bad guys chase her while she slashes and dices from a safe distance. The downside? Her highest damage skills come with cooldowns longer than your last Netflix binge session, which means when the big boss shows up, she's a bit meh in sustained damage. So, if you want someone who shines in quick skirmishes and solo play, she's your girl. Just don't expect her to carry the heavy boss fights all by herself. Now, the Magician is a totally different beast. Imagine juggling fireballs, freezing spells, and charming your enemies all at once. That's the kind of versatility we're talking about. She's got crowd control, area of effect spells, and solid single target damage, which makes her pretty handy in a variety of situations. But here's the kicker. Playing her is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. She's the most difficult class to master in Crystal of Atlan, so if you're not ready to put in the hours, you might end up frustrating yourself. Also, when it comes to group content, there are definitely better single target damage dealers who can outshine her, so don't bank on her being your raid MVP. Honestly, both of these classes have their charm, but come with quirks you need to manage. The Blade Maiden is fantastic if you like a fast-paced, hit-and-run playstyle, but can be a bit of a glass cannon against tougher bosses. Meanwhile, the Magician demands patience and skill to truly unlock her potential, but once you get there, she can control the battlefield like a seasoned wizard. Just don't expect her to solo bosses with ease or outperform other dedicated damage dealers in a team setting. So, if you're grinding through Crystal of Atlan's PvE and you're eyeing these C-tier picks, remember, it's not always about raw power. Sometimes it's about how you play the class, your patience with cooldowns, and whether you're willing to put in the effort to tame their unique quirks. Whether you're slicing and dicing with the Blade Maiden or juggling spells like a pro magician, the game rewards creativity and persistence. So have fun experimenting and find the style that clicks with you. The classes for PvE in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Gunner, Bounty Hunter, Magiblade, and Cloud Strider. Alright, let's dive into some serious Crystal of Atlan class talk, where we break down the B-tier fighters who aren't quite top dogs, but still pack a punch worthy of your attention. These are your solid, reliable warriors who will get the job done without stealing all the spotlight, kind of like that dependable friend who never flakes on plans, but also won't win karaoke night. Let's get into it. First up, we have the Gunner. Now, this guy is basically the Swiss Army knife when it comes to area of effect damage and single target damage per second for player versus environment content. What's cool is that Gunner shines bright when it comes to breaking shields, one of the best shield breakers out there. But don't get it twisted, while the Gunner has excellent crowd control and AoE, their single target damage doesn't quite hit the same level as the top meta damage dealers. So if you're facing off against a big boss and need to melt it solo, you might feel the sting there. Then there's the Bounty Hunter, a range class that moves like it's got rockets for legs. Mobility is their middle name, and that makes them super fun for PvE content where you want to dart around, avoid damage, and still dish out some serious hurt. Their single target and AoE damage per second are solid enough to clear most content solo, which is a big deal if you hate relying on a team. However, if you're gunning for the absolute best single target damage, some trickier classes out there might outshine the Bounty Hunter. Now, the Magiblade is where things get shit. This class combines excellent mobility with sustained damage per second that really keeps the pressure on enemies, whether you're solo or rolling with a party. Magiblade players tend to be those hardcore solo clear pros because this class is one of the best for clearing the entire game alone. But don't get cocky just yet. Mastering the Magiblade kit is a whole different beast. It's not for the faint of heart or the casual button masher. If you're up for a challenge though, it's a rewarding ride. Last but not least, the Cloud Strider brings a nice balance of area of effect and single target skills to the table, making them pretty versatile for different PvE scenarios. Their sustained damage per second works well both solo and in group play, which is handy when you're switching between content types. The catch? The Cloud Strider isn't exactly a walk in the park to play. Plus, compared to other melee classes, their survivability is on the lower side, so you've got to be quick on your feet and really know your timing. So what do you get with these B-tier classes overall? They aren't the flashiest or the absolute hardest hitters, but they bring solid, dependable damage and unique playstyles that can really shine with the right player behind the controls. They're like the middle child of the Crystal of Atlan class family. Maybe not the spotlight grabbers, but definitely not the forgotten ones. If you're new or just want a fun, flexible option that rewards learning and skill, the B tier is a sweet spot to explore. They're forgiving enough not to frustrate beginners, but deep enough to keep veterans engaged. Plus, if you're all about solo content and don't mind putting in some effort, classes like Magiblade or Bounty Hunter might just be your new best friends. Alright, now that we've sized up the B tier contenders, are you tempted to give one a spin, or are you already rocking one and feeling pretty good about your choice? Either way, these classes prove that you don't need to be meta to be mighty. The classes for PvE in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Elementalist. Alright, let's talk about the Elementalist, the class that's basically the Swiss Army knife of damage in Crystal of Atlan player versus environment, or PvE. If you want sustained area of effect damage that just doesn't quit, plus solid single target damage, this is your go-to. The Elementalist can switch between different elemental attacks like a pro DJ changing beats, so you're never stuck with one boring move. In group PvE, they shine brightest, absolutely crushing it as the top damage dealer. You want to melt mobs and bosses alike? The Elementalist's got you covered, but here's the catch. This class is like a glass cannon with zero mobility or survivability. You step out of that cozy group bubble and suddenly you're about as durable as a sandcastle in a hurricane. So if you like to run and gun solo or hate relying on your teammates for protection, the Elementalist might test your patience and your health bar. Still, if you're rolling deep in a party and want to feel like a magical demolition crew, the Elementalist is the spicy choice that will keep your DA. The classes for PvE in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Warlock and Scytheguard. Alright, let's dive right into the juicy stuff about the absolute monsters of Crystal of Atlan's player versus environment gameplay. First up, we have the Warlock, and trust me, this guy is basically the solo PvE king. If you like handling everything on your own, the Warlock is your go-to class because it can pretty much clear every single encounter without breaking a sweat. Why? Because it's got some serious self-sustain powers that keep it alive longer than your favorite sitcom's reruns. Plus, it's not just about raw damage. The Warlock can throw down crowd control and debuffs like it's handing out candy on Halloween. But, heads up, if you're hopping into group content, the Warlock's solo superstar shine dims a bit, and it's not really the top damage dealer in team fights. Now, if you're the social butterfly type who loves teaming up with others, the Scytheguard is basically your best friend in Crystal of Atlan. This class absolutely shines in group-based player versus environment content. It's got the unique ability to support the team while still dishing out solid area of effect damage, which is pretty impressive for a support class, right? What's cooler is that it can still hold its own when you're flying solo, reliably handling most challenges without needing a backup. The only catch? When it comes to melting a single tough enemy, it doesn't quite hit those mind-blowing numbers like some of the pure damage dealers do. So basically, the Warlock is your powerhouse for solo missions. Think of it as that one friend who never needs help moving furniture, strong and independent. Meanwhile, the Scytheguard is like the ultimate team player who brings everyone together, adding support, crowd control, and decent damage, kind of like the glue holding your raid group's dreams together. You pick the Warlock if you want to roll deep solo and feel like a one-person wrecking crew, and the Scytheguard if you want to squad up and still keep the damage flowing while having your teammates' backs. At the end of the day, it really depends on your playstyle vibe. Want to solo everything while looking cool and casting spells like a boss? Warlock's got you covered. Want to be that MVP in your group, supporting and smashing enemies all at once? Scytheguard is where it's at. No matter what, Crystal of Atlan's got these classes perfectly balanced so you can slay those player versus environment challenges your way. Now it's time for the best classes for PvE. The classes for PvP in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Blade Maiden and Elementalist. Alright, let's get real for a second. If you're thinking about jumping into Crystal of Atlan PvP with the Blade Maiden, you better bring some patience along. This class dishes out some seriously impressive burst damage and combos that can melt opponents if you catch them right. But here's the kicker. The Blade Maiden's mobility is pretty much the definition of meh. She's stuck moving at a snail's pace, which means if you run into a melee enemy who's got more agility, you're probably in for a bad time. And to top it off, most of her attacks are super easy to dodge, so if your opponent's paying attention, they'll laugh their way out of your combos. Now about those cooldowns, oh boy. The Blade Maiden's cooldowns are long enough to take a coffee break, watch a whole TV episode, and still not be ready again. It's like she throws all her power in one punch and then takes a long nap, waiting for her skills to recharge. So if you want to play smart, you've got to make every burst count, because after that, you're basically swinging with one hand tied behind your back. Switching gears to the Elementalist, this one's the classic glass cannon. She's packing some serious long-range nukes that can make you feel like a wizard blasting fireballs from a mountaintop. The potential to drop some massive damage from afar is definitely there. But, and this is a big but, her long cast animations mean she's practically inviting enemies to walk right up and poke her while she's busy casting. And just like the Blade Maiden, her mobility is painfully low, so if you blink, you might miss your chance to escape. Honestly, in the world of Crystal of Atlan player versus player combat, the Elementalist kind of holds the title for being the absolute worst class for PvP. She's like that friend who talks a big game but freezes up the moment it's showtime. long animations, low mobility, and getting caught out in the open make her a prime target for every sneaky melee and ranged attacker out there. So if you want to avoid ending up as a sitting duck, you might want to think twice before picking her for your next battle. The classes for PvP in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Gunner and Warlock. Alright, let's talk about some of the characters that live right in the middle of the pack. The C-tier classes in Crystal of Atlan PvP. These guys aren't exactly stealing the spotlight, but they've got their moments. First up, we have the Gunner. Now the Gunner is like that reliable friend who's got decent range and can even hold their own in close combat. Think of them as a sharper, more polished version of the Elementalist. But here's the catch, if an enemy manages to sneak up close, the Gunner suddenly becomes that friend who screams, "I'm out of here," because melee classes absolutely wreck them at close range. So while the Gunner can throw down from afar, don't expect them to survive a full-on brawl. Then there's the Warlock, a class that's all about control and chaos. If you want to mess with your opponent's head, the Warlock's your go-to with excellent crowd control and debuffs. They dish out solid damage per second, and when they combo right, it looks downright nasty. But here's where things get tricky. Their skill options for player versus player combat don't really hit that wow factor, especially compared to other classes. Plus, they're not exactly beginner friendly, meaning if you're new to PvP, you might find better bang for your buck elsewhere. What's interesting about these two is that they both bring something unique to the table, but neither quite dominates. The Gunner's versatility is overshadowed by their vulnerability in melee, while the Warlock's toolkit is powerful but requires a bit of finesse and patience to shine. It's like having a fancy sports car that can go fast but struggles on rough roads, versus a tricky magic user who's great if you know how to drive, but a headache if you don't. So if you're cruising through Crystal of Atlan PvP and want something solid without being over the top, these classes might be worth a shot. Just don't expect to be carrying every match. They fill a nice middle ground, but the game's better and easier to play PvP classes often steal their thunder. Still, if you enjoy a bit of challenge or like the playstyle, there's definitely fun to be had here. The classes for PvP in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Starbreaker, Scytheguard, Cloudstrider, and Magiblade. Alright, let's get real about some of the B-tier fighters in Crystal of Atlan. You know, the kind of classes that aren't exactly stealing the spotlight but still pack a punch when you get to know them. So, first up, the Starbreaker. This guy is ridiculously easy to pick up, like even your grandma could figure it out after a cup of tea. Not only that, but it has some serious combo potential and solid burst damage. If you're the type who loves jumping into player versus player battles and just smashing faces up close, the Starbreaker is one of the best melee classes for that. The only catch, it doesn't have the staying power, the sustain that a Berserker would give you. So yeah, don't expect to be in the fight forever, but while you're there, you'll make it count. Moving on, the Scytheguard is like that reliable tank buddy who's always got your back. Thanks to some sweet support skills, this class can soak up damage like a sponge. Plus, its damage per second, let me spell that out. Damage per second, or how much damage you deal every second, is pretty decent because of its short cooldowns, so you're constantly throwing out attacks without waiting forever. But here's the kicker, in the player versus player meta, it kind of gets overshadowed by the flashier classes. It's not a total loser, but it's not the one you want leading your kill streak either. Now, let me tell you about the Cloudstrider. If mobility was a superhero power, this class would wear the cape. It's insanely quick, with great combo potential that keeps your opponents on their toes. When it comes to damage per second in player versus player fights, Cloudstrider really shines. It's definitely one of the best in that regard. However, don't get too cocky because its survivability is, well, pretty low. You're basically a glass cannon, powerful but fragile. Plus, classes like the Bounty Hunter can easily keep you at a distance and chip away at your health before you even get close, so you have to be smart and quick about when and how you strike. The Magiblade, on the other hand, is the flashy ninja of the bunch. It combines excellent mobility with burst damage that can make your opponent's head spin. If you're skilled enough, you can go toe-to-toe with almost any melee class in player versus player. But here's the catch, it's squishier than the Berserker and a few other melee classes. Basically, it takes finesse and skill to pull off those flashy moves without getting destroyed. So, if you want to be the cool kid with quick kills and style, but don't mind the challenge, this is your go-to. In all honesty, these B-tier classes might not always steal the show, but they offer some solid options if you want to experiment beyond the usual suspects. Whether you want a simple and straightforward Starbreaker or a tricky and nimble Magiblade, there's something for every kind of player here. Just don't expect to waltz into every battle and come out unscathed. Each one has its quirks and weaknesses. If you're a beginner, the Starbreaker's ease of use makes it a great entry point. You can focus on learning the ropes without getting overwhelmed. On the flip side, if you're the kind of player who likes a bit of a challenge and enjoys outsmarting your opponents, the Magiblade will keep you entertained and sharp. It's like choosing between a hammer and a scalpel. You'll want to pick what fits your style. And hey, if tanking damage is your thing, the Scythe Guard can fill that role pretty well. It's like the sturdy friend who's not the flashiest, but always reliable. Meanwhile, the Cloud Strider is for those who want to zip around the battlefield, hit hard, and then vanish before anyone can catch them. But remember, that fragility means you have to play smart. So, in the end, these B-tier classes might not be the top dogs, but they've got their own personalities and niches. Pick one that vibes with your playstyle and you'll be surprised how much fun you can have even outside the meta. Who says you need to be the strongest when you can be the smartest or the quickest? The classes for PvP in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Magician. Alright, let me hit you with some real talk about the Magician in Crystal of Atlan. If you're the kind of player who loves having a little bit of everything in their toolkit, damage, crowd control, and mobility, this class is basically your Swiss Army knife. Seriously, the Magician is the most well-rounded class when it comes to player versus player combat, meaning you can handle most situations thrown at you without breaking a sweat. You get the flashy skills, the sneaky moves, and enough tricks up your sleeve to keep opponents guessing. It's like being a ninja, but with spells and a fancy hat. Now, before you go all in, here's the kicker. The Magician is also the toughest class to master. It's not your average spam this button and win kind of deal. You have to think fast, position better, and time your crowd control just right, or else you're basically handing your opponents a free win. But hey, if you love a challenge and want to flex those brain muscles while still dishing out serious damage, the Magician will be your best friend and your biggest headache all at once. So buckle up, because this class isn't for the faint-hearted, but it sure is a blast when you get it right. The classes for PvP in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Berserker and Bounty Hunter. Alright, let's talk about the absolute monsters of Crystal of Atlan PvP, starting with Berserker. Now this guy is basically the easy mode button when it comes to PvP. You don't have to be a pro gamer to wreck faces here, because Berserker's combos and burst damage are just nuts. Sure, his invincibility can get broken in PvP, so he's not completely untouchable. But honestly, the sheer power and straightforward playstyle make him the king of the battlefield. If you want to jump in and start demolishing enemies without sweating over complex mechanics, Berserker is your best friend. Moving on to Bounty Hunter. Now here's a class that's all about speed, precision, and keeping your enemies guessing. If you like running circles around your opponents while raining down damage, this is your pick. The mobility is insane, and almost all of Bounty Hunter's skills are super tricky to dodge. You basically turn into this slippery nightmare they can't pin down. That said, this agility comes with a catch. Survivability isn't their strong suit, so if someone nukes you with heavy damage, you're going down fast. So keep those reflexes sharp and don't get caught out. Both these classes absolutely shine in PvP, but they bring different flavors to the fight. Berserker is your straightforward powerhouse. Think big hammer, big damage, no fuss. Bounty Hunter is the sneaky hit and run artist who can kite enemies endlessly, but needs to watch their back. Depending on your style, you either want to smash faces head on or dance around them like a ninja with a target on your back. At the end of the day, if you want the easiest entry to PvP dominance, Berserker has you covered with a great balance of power and simplicity. But if you're more about that tactical, evasive gameplay with crazy mobility and a chance to outplay your foes, Bounty Hunter is a blast. Just don't expect to tank hits like a tank, pick your poison, and may your combos be ever in your favor. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.